Just another rainy day. The next day it rained. My father asked me how I'd like to go to the movies. Just me, I asked. No, all three of us, he said. Fudge is very young to go, I said. Don't you think so? Maybe, but I can't think of anything else to do with him, and that will take up a few hours. You could give him some socks, I suggested. You know how he loves to play with socks. Socks won't last the whole afternoon, my father said. That's why I thought of the movies. What'll we see, Dad? My father checked in the New York Times. How about A Bear's Life is playing in the neighborhood? How does that sound? What's it about? I asked. A bear's life, I guess, my father said. It's rated G. I was thinking of a good Western with lots of of action, or else a picture that was rated R where you can't get in and you're under 17 unless you're with your parent. But my father had made up his mind. A bear life it was. I suggested that my father get Fudge cleaned up because by then he was looking kind of messy. I don't think my father even put him into his pajamas last night. He's been wearing the same polo shirt ever since Mom left yesterday morning. By 1 o'clock, we were all ready to go. The three of us wore our raincoats and rubbers, and my father took his big black umbrella. One thing about New York City, it's hard to get a cab when it's raining. But the movie theater wasn't far away. My father said the walk would do us all good. There was a lot of puddles. It was really pouring. I like to walk in the rain, especially if it's not too cold out. It feels nice when it wets your face. So I jumped over the puddles. My brother avoided them too, but not Fudge. He jumped right in every one and splashed around like a little duck. By the time we got to the movie theater, the bottoms of his pants were soaked. My father took him into the men's room, stuffed a bunch of paper towels up each pant leg so that Fudge would have to sit on the around wet. At first, Fudge complained, but when my father brought him a big box of popcorn, he forgot all about his stuffed pants. Right after we got settled into our seats, a big boy sat down in front of Fudge, so he had to change seats with my father. Now I was on the aisle. I was in the middle, and my father was on the other side. When the lights dimmed, Fudge went, "Ooh, dark." I told him, "Be quiet. You can't talk in the movies." "Okay, Peter," he said. That's when he started throwing his popcorn. At first, I didn't notice it, but I wondered why all the people in front of us were turning around every second. Then I heard Fudge whisper, "Pow, pow, pow," and I thought he was throwing handfuls of popcorn. I poked my father. "He's throwing his popcorn," I whispered. My father reached across, tapped Fudge on the leg. "If you throw one more piece, I'm going to take it away from you." "No throw," Fudge said very loud. "Shh." The people in front of us said, "Shh," said Fudge back at them. "You see," I told my father. "I told you he was too young for the movies. He doesn't understand." But from that moment, the first bear came onto the screen. Fudge sat still and watched, and after a while, I forgot all about him and concentrated on the movie. It was much better than I thought it would be. It showed all these bears and cubs and how they live. I'm not sure when I realized Fudge was gone. I guess it's when I turned to ask him if he had any popcorn left. I had already finished mine, and I was still hungry. I wasn't really surprised to see that he wasn't there. I mean, one minute he was sitting right next to me, and the next minute he's gone. "Hey, Dad," I whispered to my dad. "He's gone." "What?" my father asked. "Fudge. He's not in his seat." My father looked over. "Where'd he go?" "I don't know. I just noticed he was gone." "Let me help, Peter. I'll go find him." "Should I come too?" I asked. "No. You can sit here and watch the rest of the picture. He's probably wandering around the candy corner." So I stood up and let my father out, and wondered what my mother would think if she knew Fudge was lost in the movies. A few minutes later, the picture stopped right in the middle of the scene. The soundtrack trailed off and like a broken record. All the lights came on the audience, and everybody let out a groan. Some kids boo, boo. Then my father and two ushers and a man in a suit came over with me. "He was sitting right here," my father told them, pointing the empty seat on the aisle. "The restrooms in the office. He's not behind the candy counter. We have to search the theater." He cupped his hands around his mouth, and I shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? We'll continue with our film in a moment, but first we have to find a 3-year-old boy answering to the name of Fudge. Some people laughed when the man said his name. I guess Fudge doesn't sound very funny if you're not used to it. I thought maybe he's been kidnapped. Would my mother be mad? That crazy kid? You can't even take him to the movies. Then I thought, who'd want to kidnap him anyways? What should I do, Dad? I said. Why don't you walk up and down the aisles and call for him, Peter? Okay, I said. Here, Fudge, I called, starting down in my aisle. I sounded like I was calling for a dog. Come on out, Fudge. When I got down to the first row, I called out, Here, Fudge. He popped up at me. He scared me so bad I yelled, Oh! Hi, Peta, he said. Hey, I found him. I called. I found him. I found him. Here he is. Then I turned to my brother. You dope. What are you doing way down here? And why are you sitting on the floor? Wanted to touch bears, Fudge said, but bears all gone. He spread out his arms and said, All gone again. My father and the ushers and the man in the suit ran to us. Fudge, my father said, scooping him up. Are you all right? He wanted to pet the bears, I said. Can you beat that? Well, I guess we can continue the picture now, the man in the suit said. He cupped his hands around the mouth again. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our young man has been found safe and sound. Now let's return to the conclusion of a bear's life. My father carried Fudge back to our seats. He held on to him in his lap for the rest of the show. I guess he wasn't taking any more chances. Later, when we got home, my father explained to Fudge that movies are like TV. It's just a picture. There's nothing to touch. Fudge listened, but I don't know whether he believed my father. I had the feeling he still thought those bears were in the theater somewhere. I made it up in my mind that I would never take my little brother to the movies. Never. At least not until he was 9 or 10. My father said he was going to cook us something special for dinner to celebrate finding Fudge at the movies. I thought that was really strange because, as far as I know, my father can't cook anything. He doesn't even know where my mother keeps the peanut butter, the dishes, or the pots and pans. Luckily for him, I was there to show him. What are you going to cook, Dad? A super duper omelet, he said. Omelet? I'm not sure me and Fudge like omelets. Oh, you'll like this one, my dad said, humming, as he gathered the ingredients together. Get me a big frying pan, Peter. Okay, I said, and I gave it to him. He melted some butter in it. What's going in the super duper omelet? I asked, while Fudge sat on the floor, banging 2 pot covers together. Well, the eggs, of course, my father said. Omelets are made of eggs. And what else? I asked. Oh, I think maybe make a mushroom omelet. Eggs and mushrooms, I said. Yes, you'll love it. I'm not so sure. You'll see, Peter, my father said. I set up the table and my father cooked. I even put Fudge in his booster chair. And then the omelet was done. My father brought it over. It was still humming. That's some big omelet, I said, when I saw it. It filled up the whole frying pan. How many eggs did you use? Oh, about a dozen, my father said. Mom only cooks 1 egg at a time, I told him. When you taste this, you'll know why I use them all up. You mean it's that good? I asked. Go on, my father served me taste it. I took one bite. It was awful. It was the worst thing I'd ever ate in my life. But my father was standing there grinning at me. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. Well, he said, it's nice, I told him, swallowing a chunk whole. I washed it down with a glass of milk. You see, your mother ought to experiment more. Then you'd learn how to eat different things. I don't think Mom's ever made me a mushroom omelet, I said. My father put some on Fudge's plate. Then he served himself. Fudge shoved a lot into his mouth. Once I waited, figuring he'd choke on it. Instead, he's like, Oh, good. My father beamed. Fudge wasn't smart enough to fool my father, so he must have really liked it. But a kid that can eat flowers and swallow his teeth wouldn't know much about omelets, anyways. Then my father sat down and tasted his super duper concoction. He not only choked on it, he spit it out. Oh no, he said. This is awful. Something went wrong. Maybe the eggs are rotten. Mom just bought them on Thursday, he said. Maybe the mushrooms are then, he said. Maybe it's how you cooked it, I suggested. My father jumped up from the table, threw the mushroom omelet out in the garbage. Fudge started crying, Want more? No, my father told him. It wasn't any good. Fudge screamed, Eat it! or wear it! Eat it or wear it! And he flung a spoon across the room and it hit my mother's favorite plant. The dirt spilled all over the kitchen floor. Now you stop that, my father yelled at Fudge. I'm going to make a nice peanut butter sandwiches, and then you're going to have a bath. Your mommy's coming home tomorrow, and we're going to show her how well Daddy managed all by himself. Peter, where does your mother hide the peanut butter? After the supper, my father bathed Fudge. The only thing he decided to do were the dishes. He stacked them in the sink and left them for my mother. On Sunday afternoon, we drove out to the airport to meet my mother's plane. On the way there, my father said, "Wouldn't it be fun if we all kept all these things we did over the weekend secret, just between the three of us? Kind of a man secret?" I agreed not to say a word. And my mother was so glad to see us, she didn't even mention the dirty dishes in the sink. 6 weeks later, when we were watching TV that night, the new Toddle Bike commercial came on. "That's me," said Fudge. My mother looked up from the book she was reading. "He does look like you, Fudge, but that's not really you." "Oh, yes, Fudge, that's me. See? My mother squinted and looked harder. "You know, Warren," she told my father, "he really does look like Fudge." Then she laughed. "Imagine another little boy like Fudge." "It's Fudge, all right," I said. "It's Fudge, all right?" my brother repeated. "He didn't tell you, dear?" my father said. "Oh, we thought you'd like to be surprised. But that is Fudge." "What?" my mother said. She couldn't believe it. "You see, Mom," I began, "remember the weekend you went to visit Aunt Linda?" When I stopped and thought about it, the things that my mother didn't know, like the puddles Fudge splashed in, the paper towels up his pants, and how he wanted to touch the bears, and the mushroom omelet, and Mr. Vincent and his big cigar, and Janet and the goldfish crackers. And I just looked at my father and started to laugh, and so did he.